All right, how about a good story? You know, fiction is fiction, and sometimes life itself is even better than fiction. In the last 2 months, I have spent quite a bit of time in and around the Noss family, the members that are still with us, on the story of Doc Noss. He was a foot doctor back in the 30s. It took his wife deer hunting with another couple one day, way back into what is now known as the White Sands Missile Range, to Victoria's Peak, which was a famous peak named after Victoria, the famous Indian chief. And certainly there is more material in that area on Victoria, than we've ever been able to put together, but we're going to do some more work on that as well. But what an interesting place. It would seem that, and this is the mine or shaft in which the government stopped production here for a period of time. And you have heard, and I'm sure seen, all the events that have transpired in the last few years. Probably one of the greatest lost treasure stories ever told. But I want to tell you from the mouth of the family what actually happened. And I was, as an educator, I was requested to come to read some Ogam and some pictographs in the area, of which I was more than happy to do, and was allowed to do that for the family. And with their permission and it being their work, we're doing this basically to tell their story, allow them to tell their story. But this is how it happened. In I believe it was the year 1937, Doc Noss and his wife with another couple went back into the area of Victoria Peak deer hunting. And they hadn't had all that much luck, and Doc one day climbed up Victoria's Peak to look around and see if he could spot deer. Victoria Peak, as you will see through this, is certainly a beautiful sight. It really is. It's all its majesty, it stands, and all the history that is recorded there. And Doc climbed up to the top of the peak, and he came by a place where from under a stone, air was just whistling out against him. He could tell, and he got against the stone and moved it, and out comes the air. And here is an ancient ladder that's in under this stone. And it's obvious it goes down into a very old mine, or at least shaft. It is a fissure in the soil there, which split Victoria Peak into really two peaks. It's twin peaks is what it is. And Doc replaced the stone, went down off the hill, Victoria Peak, and at a later time brought rope, and his wife returned. And Ova's family, her family are still involved in the search for this that was lost by Doc. But I think it's important that you know how it was lost. But back to the beginning. He took these lariat ropes, tying knots in them, and dropped them down because the ladder that was there was, it was simply had deteriorated to the point you couldn't trust it with anything. It would fall apart. Some of the leather straps would, and the sticks for steps were just would stand and bear no weight at all. And in climbing down, he was gone for quite some period of time. This would be when Ova and Doc would come back alone to investigate and see what had happened, or what they had discovered. And through a period of descents and ascents into and out of, Doc would bring out coin and crowns even with jewels in them. And it was obvious that he had quite a find. And he made a statement to Ova one day. He said that pig iron must have been very valuable. There's just ricks of pig iron down there. And Ova said to Doc, said, I'd like for you, and again, this is not a written story, this is from the mouth of the family. Said, I'd like to see one of those, bring one of them out. And she made Doc kind of a little backpack type thing that he could bring one of those bars of pig iron. And the bars of pig iron, what he was calling pig iron, were about 60 or 80 pounds apiece, and there were just ricks of them. He would later count them, and there would be 37,000 of them, bars weighing 60 to 80 pounds each. And the day comes that he climbs, and it's an ascent of probably 140 feet, I'm going to say, and I could be in error, but I'm going to say approximately 140 feet up that lariat with this 60 to 80 pound bar. And he was rather irritated because of being winded from the climb and so forth. And he takes the bar and he throws it on the ground and says, there's your bar. Don't you ever ask me to bring another one of those out of there, that pig iron. When he threw this bar, it scraped on some stones. Ova tried to pick it up. She couldn't get her fingers under it. He took a knife blade and raised it up enough that she could get her fingers under it, and she picked it up and turned it over. And where it had scraped the other rocks, this dark pig iron look was very bright gold. And Doc knew that he had quite a find, 37,000 bars of gold. It was illegal in the 30s for an American citizen to own gold, so it would be a very hard thing in his life to be able to handle this find, and ultimately it would cost him his life. But one of the saddest things that happened within this was in going to the Denver Mint and then to the state, and the state informing him that if he would make it safe for an engineer to go down in the shaft and identify what was there on his claim, then the state would call it a find, an ore find, and it would be legal for him to claim it, not as gold, but as ore. And he was in this process, he had an engineer. The engineer, if I remember correctly, it seems to me it was either 11 or 22 sticks of dynamite that in a narrow place that had to be widened a little bit before the state would go down. Why an engineer would put even 11 sticks of dynamite in a narrow place in a fissure in what was very obvious to, I'm quite a rock hound and amateur, or you might say lay archaeologist, and the mountain's rotten. And by that I mean the rock breaks easily. And what he really did, the engineer, was he blew the top and all surrounding rubble down into the shaft. And 100 foot of what, if you know what tailings are, it wouldn't be the equivalent of tailings. And today they are vacuuming in their operation these tailings. Of course, Doc tried for a long time. It was impossible. It was hundreds of feet that this dumb engineer had exploded down on, and Doc ran this man off, trying to hit him with his own shoes off the mountain. And of course, he never found it after that. The Army would soon cause them to vacate. And it would be soon after this that gold would begin to show up in mysterious places. Be that as it may, I'm going to stop that story right there. I want to show you from the Kansas City Star a artist conception of what Doc saw, if I may. You will see Victoria Peak, that's at the top, and you'll notice the shaft that goes down, and then it goes over kind of a rubble place. And I'm going to move over to this real gingerly here, if I may. Here is Victoria Peak, as you can see. This is an artist conception, and we give the credit to the Kansas City Star. Here is some rubble. And actually, when this engineer, and of course always in a drawing, this is about, if I remember right, about 140 feet from the peak down to about this level. We're talking about quite a fissure. And there is rubble, and then Doc heard water running. And this water was about 4 or 5 feet deep that he crossed, and with the water running in an open stream underground. And he continues on, and he comes into various rooms that he calls the altar room, the living room, and the bedroom, and then here are the stacks of gold that he was calling pig iron when he first arrived in the area. And it is this that the crew, the Ova Noss family, continues searching for even to this day. And certainly they have our prayers and blessings, because the gold we found at this place was really in the Ogam writings that you're going to be showing a little later through this documentary, which would date Irish Ogam approximately 900 AD, and it would probably be one of the first claims. I will keep you posted on this, because probably the name that was given through the Irish embassy, I'm trying to find at this time whether or not we can find records of someone in Ireland that sailed around 900 AD to come to America. That way we would have Ogam documenting the man's name, the find, and this would continue on. There were many other pictographs at this site, which, that being the reason I was asked to go there as an educator to determine some of the things, because you see, there were priests involved in this as well. A man came into a priest camp and told of this mountain of gold. I would not be surprised with the 37,000 bars and what was written in Irish Ogam that this is not the hill of gold. And it's one of the reasons it would ultimately receive the name Victoria Peak, closed, guarded, because that's quite a gold mine. It would have to, the vein in that fissure would have to be extremely, extremely rich. And at first thought, I thought probably because some of the pictographs showed heavily loaded carriages or wagons stored there by either Victoria or an earlier tribe of Indians. But the Ogam, as you will find, declares that quite the contrary, that it is a mine. So it will be very interesting if they are able to open the shaft again, and they have just had an extension of 1 year, which gives them plenty of time, and they're doing a real excellent job. I find it fascinating of the history. And beloved, if we can document that the Ogam, the man who wrote the Ogam, cut the Ogam, left Ireland, then we have the migrations documented, and what a token that would be in changing the writing of history itself, as early travelers traveled America, writing in their various languages. Iberians, Celts, Spaniards, and the American Indian, Victoria, and on it goes with the carriages, as you will be shown flashes of the pictographs, carriages carrying heavy loads, maps drawn in some of the most beautiful red ochre that I've witnessed anywhere. You're going to enjoy it. What a fascinating American story that is almost everything but American, dating back in history. I hope you enjoy the documentary as much as we enjoyed getting this information and visiting this place and doing the research. And of course, our thanks go to Dr. Barry Fell for his assistance with the Ogam. So, sit back and enjoy. All right, here we have one of the most interesting panels of Ogam that I've seen in a long, long time. It is the largest panel of Ogam that I'm aware of in the Rio Grande Valley area. It has been translated at this time, and we have, within the panel, we have 3 stem lines, and it reads by letter M, M, N, and then in the second line we have B, M, G, H, G, M, and then in the bottom stem line we have L with S. Now, Dr. Barry Fell, and we're so thankful for him, translates this Ogam to read as follows. Mine for metallic ore, I, Gehi, or Magehi, cut this Ogam. It is for my own profit. So, and inasmuch as this is located in an area where one of the greatest finds or supposed finds or even active research even at this time, as we'll be sharing more with you in this area, I think it is fascinating also that way less than 100 miles, and I forget exactly what I was instructed, it's something like 40 to 60 miles from the Waco tanks out of El Paso, Texas, we have the same red ochre or iron oxide found there in this same alphabet, the Ogam alphabet, alongside the Iberian alphabet, both words stating water. So it is conceivable that the same person or peoples traveled this area. This Ogam, Dr. Fell believes, dates back to Middle Irish, and it is about 900 AD. Done in about 900 AD when this type of Ogam was utilized. So it is obvious then that we have a very interesting point, that Magehi came here and discovered this mine, or found at least where someone was mining, and he would have been a Celt, and he will have traveled from Europe in the area that the Celts dwelt, inhabited, and certainly we're going to make every effort to document his trip to this area. Therefore, we will know even in the records to search around 900 AD. That will be absolute documentation. Documentation as far as the translation of this panel, it's absolute. Double M for mine, metallic ore. I, Magehi, cut this Ogam. It is for my own profit. In other words, this is an old land claim, or mine claim. Very old when we consider 900 AD. How fascinating it is as we search for truth, as we check the stones that speak, that leave a message, a footprint, that this nation and those that traveled in it, especially up and through the Rio Grande Valley, a natural highway for many years and for many past ages, centuries, that people travel. How fascinating. And you have it, Ogam, ancient Ogam in the Rio Grande Valley. Okay, here is a fascinating panel. Here we have a rider on a horse, and we'll try to give you a impression, a drawing of this that will help you. And then here we see let's call him a medicine man, a teacher. We have horns, that's power, but notice the size of this man in conjunction with this person having horns extending over, meaning power, and yet further we see a man I don't see any horns, we see something that would look more like a crown. So we see a person that from the religious aspect or rulership, then certainly we have a high figure here in this particular place. A fascinating panel, truly is. As the migrations through the Rio Grande Valley, the history and the peoples, those things that they respected, those things that they worshiped, their leaders, the men with power. Certainly a panel emphasizing that. We will move around to another panel, and I think it will be based on this same individual, and we'll say more about him at that time. All right. Now here again, a panel, but a fantastic panel, in as much as you have a shaman here, a religious man. Notice the horns and his priestly attire. But note here, you know, there was never, among the Native Americans, to my knowledge, there were not priestly robes with buttons. And here again, we have this master figure. As Quetzalcoatl was worshipped by many people, and you're familiar with Quetzalcoatl and his traveling throughout Central America, or his being reported throughout Central America, I think we should at least consider that perhaps we have here this personage, and because of the squareness, because of the robe with buttons, the attire would not fit a shaman or a medicine man. So that certainly must be taken into consideration. These panels are quite old. If we were to take, which we really could not judge the age of these by the Ogam panel, it is very possible that they could be older, or they could be since that time. But certainly here we have a touch of that would come even from Central America, Quetzalcoatl. How interesting. A priest on that panel we just left with a crown designating royalty, and here a very priestly robe, highly decorated, even with buttons. Something for you to certainly think about. An interesting panel. Here's a fascinating panel, especially when you're familiar with the history of this area. Here we have a rider on horseback, and here we have a coach. I want you to note this wheel, and with this being the coach, and with the coach being drawn there. We'll show you an enhancement of this, but what would a coach be doing in this area in the time frame that most of the history in this particular area is connected with? Well, it lets us know certainly that, again, in the Rio Grande Valley there were interesting visitors, and certainly with, again, a touch that could even be Spanish. All right, we'll say that. And certainly a panel leaving a message, and we'll say more on this later as we look at the enhancement. Here we have a miniature panel compared to the other. Also, we'll show you an enhanced copy of this. It's quite obvious, a map. It is an iron oxide or red ochre, whichever you prefer. it would seem that the map begins away from this place and it comes with up usually being north, not necessarily. It comes to what I would presume the place we're now standing at. And then this map considers what would probably be up around this ravine, and then it cuts back in, comes over, and here we have an interesting, very interesting symbol. We'll talk a little more about that symbol. Then the map continues on, up, 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 and then here a symbol. We'll also talk more about this symbol. But what an interesting and quite detailed miniature drawing, a map, even down to the animal's feet. We might say, well, why do you think that this indicates where you are on the map? Because the horse apparently is grazing or water, receiving water. And this happens to be the spring of the area. So the map would continue on up this draw and back around behind and up. Very beautiful work, very well done. Whoever presented this, whoever drew it, was very specific in detail, or at least he certainly tried to be for what he had to work with. Very fascinating. You know, when some people say the rocks don't speak, hey, and when some people might think that we're the only intelligent people in the world, intelligence has nothing to do with education. Many people that roamed this valley probably were not very well educated, but intelligent, you bet. And they were able to survive. They were able to do well, to find those places that were comfortable, to find even the minerals that they sought, that man has always sought. A fascinating, certainly, pictograph. Now we will, map, I'm going to call it a map, and we will be talking more about that with an enhancement. And here you see a larger panel above us, and you will note that from my viewpoint, this would be about the center of the spiral or coil on the other side. Now, you will note that this spiral apparently has a portion tailing off and pointing down, which means above, and this one possibly meaning below. Sometimes it's according to who put it there as to what it means. Sometimes it means this is the place, all right? Let us say if it were Old Spanish. If it were Old Spanish, it would say this is the spot, because it comes down in circle to the spot. However, there are far more ancient peoples that used that as well. Perhaps we'll speak a little more on that, but what a fascinating panel we have here. And we'll show you a blow-up of this as well. The rocks do speak, you bet they do. So when you are in your travels and you spot something like this, don't touch it, don't desecrate it, leave it there. It's ancient. And if you must put your initials or your name somewhere, don't put it near an ancient writing or drawing. They're very significant in our trying to understand even our own people, our own histories, the people of this world, the people and their migrations. Protect them and help protect them, respect them. Because certainly, as I stated, the rocks do talk if you'll only listen. Definitely. We have a panel, and I'm going to ask the camera to come to this extreme end of the red ochre, and you see an Indian sitting. I'm going to say it's an Indian because there are feathers. And the feathers are not straight up in a proud way, but they are
bent over forward as though his head is in sorrow. A fallen warrior, perhaps. And an area there that's very difficult to make out. But then, of course, the bloody hands. And, of course, what did it mean? Well, with the fallen warrior, or the mourning, this is obviously a person in mourning. And now we see above that a very interesting symbol pointing up. What does it mean? It would be very difficult to say. But what a fascinating drawing it is. And now that I look at it closer, directly in front of the Indian in mourning, I'm going to call him, you see a steer head with horns, and even the eyes of the animal in detail standing out very clearly. What did that mean? Well, it meant a great deal to somebody, because this was not a place of rejoicing, but with bloody hands, it was a place of sorrow. Here we have an interesting panel. We have something in upward movement, and certainly I can't distinguish what it is just at first glance, but as horns indicate power always, but so do peaks or mountains. Could it be Victoria and Geronimo, the lieutenant and the captain, or should we say the two captains? We have Victoria Peak near here, and it has a fault that divides the mountain. They moved apart. A very interesting pictograph. Discussion, that's all it is discussion. But certainly, as you observe the rocks and the message left, it would seem that in part, perhaps that's the message they intended. We would have, some would read this, if we had this as an ancient mem in Hebrew, but not so. The focus is upon the peaks. And a split or a fissure. So it's very interesting, especially due to the location that we're standing. Okay, here we have, because of the location, the bloody hands and a possible fallen warrior or a warrior in mourning. We have what we see quite common over in Oklahoma is weeping eye, which means mourning also. And certainly we have a face in red ochre, and this eye, which is always the eye that weeps usually, and certainly it is weeping, it would appear. Weeping eyes on the bluff that we will call Bloody Hands. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're very privileged to be at the base camp for the Ova Noss family organization on Victoria Peak. A story that I know many of you have heard at one time or the other, and we're really privileged that Robert Young of Miami, Florida, who is now the director and supervisor of the operation, is going to share with us the story, part of American history. History is so important, especially for the young people, that you know and remember how this nation came to be, even from ancient times, as you're going to be showing in this series some pictographs from long ago, and some maybe from not so long ago. And we're going to piece them together. But first, I want you to hear the story so that you can better understand how courageous an American family can be, even sometimes when seemingly they might have been done wrong. But they don't give up. In my estimation, they're can-do people. Robert, it's a pleasure being with you today.
Thank you.
And share with us, if you will, the story.
I'll be happy to.
The Noss family.
It all started in 1937 when Dr. Milton E. Noss was out hunting for deer with his wife Ova in a place here in southern New Mexico, which is north of El Paso. This section is called the Hembrio Basin of the San Andreas Mountains. And while searching for deer, he went up to the top of a peak that's about 500 feet in elevation above the floor of the valley. And in looking around for deer, it began to rain. He took shelter, and he noticed a rock, which he ended up moving. And quite a foul blast of air ascended from under this rock, and he noticed an old ancient ladder. So he thought that obviously deserved some further exploration, and the next day he went back and descended into that ladder with flashlights and that sort of gear and rope and so forth, and ventured down several hundreds of feet and accessed some caverns with some old ancient artifacts and treasure. He brought out some of the artifacts, and he was telling his wife Ova, who waited for him up top, that there was bars stacked up like cordwood down there that looked like pig iron. And she encouraged him to bring one up just for further exploration of whatever this mineral might be in such abundance down there. And in doing so, he brought it up, and they scratched it and discovered that it appeared to be gold, and that he estimated there could be as many as 16,000 gold bars in these caverns, the origin of which is a mystery into itself, how these bars arrived and were placed into this location. We believe it may be old Spanish gold, but also in the caverns he found a lot of artifacts that also date into the 1880s. The Spanish gold and artifacts date probably from around the 1690s. At that time, it was illegal for American citizens to own gold other than the form of jewelry, and being from a somewhat poor family, he had a difficult time in trying to deal with all of this in converting it and so forth, and didn't have the connections to properly pursue this sort of. He brought out, over a couple-year period till 1939, a couple of hundred bars of gold and buried them in the desert in the vicinity of the peak. And he took 3 bars up to the Denver Mint, and they confiscated them. He took a bar to the governor of New Mexico and tried to solicit the state's help to convert these bars to cash or that sort of thing. The governor's office stated that if they would make it safe passage and easier to access, because it took him most of a day to go down, to descend down into the caverns and to come back up, that they would send inspectors down, verify his claim and the existence of this treasure, and help him to convert it. In doing so, he hired a mining engineer, and in trying to clear an obstruction that made it very difficult to pass up high inside the peak, they overcharged it, and the blast collapsed debris inside the peak, and they sealed themselves out of the main caverns. This was in 1939. They attempted to try to reopen the caverns, and it was a bucket at a time from 150 feet below where they entered into the mountain, and it was extremely difficult, very hard labor as you could imagine. It's a very remote location. The war broke out. They left the area. They came back. Ova continually tried to, a bucket at a time, to clean this debris out. And in 1949, Doc Noss, as he was referred to, made an arrangement with a partner from Texas to fly in. They were going to load some gold bars and fly them into Mexico to convert them there, because you can sell gold in Mexico at that time. They ended up in a fight. Doc Noss was shot and killed, and the location for many of these bars that he reburied in the desert have been unknown to the family. He did not share with his family these locations because he wanted them to be protected from being harassed or so forth, to divulge the information of where these bars might be located. Meanwhile, Ova continued to try to clear the shaft to regain entrance to the caverns. And shortly after 1949, the White Sands Missile Range was expanded, and it brought in to their boundary what is now where Victoria Peak was located. The state of New Mexico, which owned the land prior to this, had granted mining claims to the Nosses to pursue their activity in the military basically expelled them from the area. They continually requested and petitioned for permission to re-enter and to continue their activity, which was denied. Ova Noss herself died in 1979, having been unsuccessful to get back to the peak to reopen the caverns. And her grandson, Terry Delonis, has dedicated the last 13 years of his life to solve this mystery, to redeem his grandparents and the story that they told and that they believed in. And against great odds, he has endeavored to get us into the position that we are now. This required getting an act of Congress to allow the Department of the Army to let the Ova Noss Family Partnership go on to White Sands Missile Range for the purpose of exploration and to try to reopen these caverns. This particular expedition began this summer of '92, and we are now continuing after a break through the holidays and the first of the year. And we are trying to excavate into this main fissure that Doc originally descended down into to access the caverns, and we're doing excavation by suction with a large vacuum truck. We have had drilling rigs up on the peak in the fall trying to drill and penetrate the main caverns, and we're going to continue to have more drilling equipment up there this spring to try to do the same. We have developed some of the most sophisticated downhole camera systems to assist us in this effort. We have a large number of people that are involved in this from around the country, and on their own time as volunteer laborers, they have paid their own expenses to come here to southern New Mexico and to work with us and provide the manpower necessary to do this operation.
Well, that's fantastic, Robert. It really is. How could, if someone wanted to become a part, what would be necessary? What would they have to do to help you all? I know that the expenses have got to be a little rough and so on and so forth. And how could someone best assist you all? We have an audience that when we see can-do type people, we like to pitch in too. And we feel that the history and everything connected with this is extremely important. And quite frankly, I don't like to see families that are, I don't want to say misused, but certainly at least we could say receive some bad breaks as far as the treatment, even from our own government, whether World War II or not. And is it possible that if that people could buy shares in the project, or could they make donations? Would they be accepted? Can we help you in that way?
Yes, we accept services in kind, and we've been fortunate to have a lot of corporate sponsors that have stepped forward and helped provide us materials and so forth for this project. We have a lot of supporters that have participated in the Ova Noss Family Partnership. Anybody that has an interest in this project and so forth should contact us at our Las Cruces, New Mexico field office, where we are running this operation out of, and I can give you that address and
we'll
so
share
forth.
it with them on the screen. We'll be sharing it.
We'd be happy for them to contact us and to visit with us and discuss the project.
Well, that's great. I must tell you that we've certainly enjoyed our visit, and we'll keep working and on some of the petroglyphs and pictographs. And I must say we've enjoyed this day, your hospitality, and here at base camp, hey, a home in the desert. I might ask a question or two about Mrs. Noss. In other words, did I understand you to say these bars that he had buried, he didn't share with the family, so they were, at least to anyone's knowledge, they were never recovered then?
No, there was a gentleman who assisted him the night before his murder in relocating 110 of these bars. And he was out this summer, and we scoured the area with metal detecting crews, and we have found holes where we thought the bars were setting, of the description, the size of the hole, the depth of the hole, more or less. I mean, the desert doesn't change greatly from year to year necessarily. Some places it does, obviously. But we found these depressions in the areas we thought we would from his descriptions and so forth. Unfortunately, we were not able to uncover or find any of the bars that he moved that night. In my quick synopsis, I've kind of jumped quickly and was talking more about the activities of the family on the peak. There was a lot that transpired in the intervening decades that happened to the family, as you alluded to, with some of the obstacles they've had to overcome to try to pursue, their claim.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, Robert, if I may, could I ask, how is the family doing today? How have they been treated recently? How are things going? Tell us.
Things are going a lot better. Unfortunately, in Mrs. Noss's lifetime, she was somewhat mistreated. Her due process and rights weren't really availed to her. Today, things have changed a lot. The atmosphere is a lot different. We've gotten a lot of support and cooperation, particularly even with the military, the current administration, and White Sands Missile Range. They are helping to allow us to do this effort. So things have changed a lot in the last few years, and we're very thankful for that.
Well, that's great. That's encouraging. And again, our prayers and best wishes are going to be with you in this. And hey, can we come back sometime and get a future report?
Absolutely. We'd
Well,
love
great.
to have you all come back again, and
Wow.
hopefully we'll have some great news to report in the near future.
Well, that's great. We're certainly going to be looking forward to the outcome. And thanks again, Robert, for having allowed us here and to our audience. We
Thank you.
appreciate that so very much. Well, there you have it, my friends. New Mexico, the land of enchantment. And hey, when we see not a story, a true life event, then how fascinating it is. New Mexico, the land of enchantment, of mysteries. But I feel this is a mystery that's going to be solved before too many months and days go by. Why? Hey, we got a lot of can-do type people working on this project. And if any of you feel led to inquire or visit with them, you feel free to. I must say that their honesty and search for truth has really taken my heart and mind, and my prayer is that God really blesses them. So there you have it, New Mexico, the land of enchantment, yes, and the great peak, Victoria's Peak. You know what? You were there.
All right, what a trip. What an exciting story. I would encourage any of you that are interested, if you wish to make contact to the Ova Noss family and their project. There will be very few times in history, or in the future, I probably should say, that people will have an opportunity to participate in such an exciting thing. So as we see time, as time marches on, and certainly the very hard work that the volunteers are doing out on this site, how exciting it is, the excitement. And certainly I would say, many might say, well, boy, they've sure got, it would seem they would have gold fever. No, they all are a very settled, positive thinking group of people, very intelligent as far as knowing what they're doing. They're well educated in what they're doing, I should say, in the mining of this, the reopening of the mine. It's going to be exciting. Again, my gold mine was finding the Ogam, the Celtic Ogam from 900 AD. That's priceless, beloved. That travelers, Iberians from the Middle East, Celts from Northern Europe, Spaniards from Spain, Coronado, talking about the mountain of gold. 37,000 60 to 80 pound bars. You know something? On today's market, That would be an awful lot of gold. So it's a good story for both the treasure hunter and the student that marks the stones that speak the travels of the peoples that travel the land. Within this, you have all of it. I must say, the area in which the pictographs were displayed, there was fresh water, there were cotton trees, beautiful cotton trees, there was fresh grass, and the very map itself of the horse, I feel tethered, that goes right up to the very fascia that marks the mine, done in the same red ochre, it would appear, that the Ogam was drawn in. And it was real strange. We found on down at the Bloody Hands Cliff a mortar, which you know what that is. That's where Indians would grind corn. But there was a little more than corn ground in this one mortar, for red ochre had been crushed. Stone had been crushed to draw, to paint this red ochre in this. Now, Victoria would later use, I would suppose, red ochre that came from this same paint, that would come from this same mortar manufactured there, not too many miles from this place, up above Chloride, which was that silver mining town, with that valley that goes out, that was Victoria's escape route, that always letting him escape the U.S. Army until he finally would deliver his own self up, surrender, that is to say, to a group of black cavalry. Exciting area. I just love going there. And the history, all the peoples that passed through this place certainly show the migrations. Again, if anyone is interested, talk to the Ova Noss family if you want to participate in one of the most exciting finds. What is my opinion? Well, I feel it's there. And if only the very rooms itself, but no one, after that dynamite explosion, had an opportunity to go into those chambers. It's going to be exciting. Who knows? Maybe we'll be invited back when and if that should happen. I want to thank the Ova Noss family for sharing with us their story. We have done this on behalf and for the Ova Noss family in their quest to document Doc's find and the meaning for education, those signs found on the rocks. For indeed, the rocks do speak. I hope you can grasp the magnitude of Celtic as well as Celtic Ogam, as well as drawings even that could be symbolize Quetzalcoatl. Who was Quetzalcoatl? You will remember for the Mayans, he was a man that came from across the water and taught them, do not sacrifice human beings. He was a savior. And then the Savior went back into the water and promised he would return someday at a second advent. Interesting, fascinating, fascinating as we trace the writings in stone and the message they still bear. I hope you've enjoyed it. It was a pleasure being there, a real pleasure and a very spiritual experience. God bless you.